this phrase, knowing presence, it's synonymous with aware presence. I don't mean knowing in the sense of a conventional sense of knowing an object. It's simply the presence that we are, the simple knowing of our own being. And this being that we are is an aware being. So, for instance, right now, whatever we are, whatever I am, is not only present, but it is also aware. It is, for instance, aware of this conversation or our thoughts or our bodily sensations. So that is what is meant to be conveyed in this phrase, knowing presence or aware presence. In reality, nothing cuts us off from that. We never, for a moment, cease to be anything other than this aware presence. But this aware presence doesn't have any objective qualities. In other words, it can't be seen or heard or touched or tasted. So we tend to overlook it. Although it is just the simple, most obvious, always experienced or always known presence or being that I am. Nevertheless, because it's, as it were, transparent, because it doesn't have objective qualities, we overlook it and mistake ourselves for something else. When I say something else, I mean a thought, an image, a memory, a sensation, an idea, or actually a combination of all these things. And it's as a result of mistaking ourselves for something other than this aware presence that the qualities of peace and love and happiness that are inherent in aware presence, in fact not inherent in aware presence, but are aware presence. These qualities, if we can call them qualities, are veiled. And we seem to shrink. We don't really shrink, but we seem to shrink into a little dense located entity, which is as it were, a conglomeration of all these thoughts and feelings and sensations and beliefs. And so we seem to become something other than this aware presence. And it is as a result of that apparent contraction into a limited located entity that the experience of suffering arises. Suffering, I simply mean the veiling of happiness. And therefore this entity, this separate entity that we seem to become but never actually become, is by definition always on a search to recover the lost peace, happiness, or love. This search that the separate entity is engaged in, there's a whole variety of forms. The conventional form of this search is in the world, objects, substances, activities, relationships, etc., etc. The separate self, or the imaginary separate self, because it's not a real separate self, but the imaginary separate self engages in all of these activities and relationships, and in order to find or recover this happiness. And then after we've been engaged in that search for a certain amount of time, and inevitably it fails us because happiness cannot ever be found in an object, most of us then take to a slightly more refined form of this conventional search, which is the spiritual search. And instead of searching for objects and substances and relationships, we tend to seek states of the mind through various kind of practices. And again, like the physical objects, these may temporarily relieve our suffering, but don't really go to the root of it. So sooner or later, the suffering returns. And so at some point, the whole conventional and unconventional search for relief from suffering in the realm of objects, situations, relationships, etc., fails us. And there's really only one place left to look, and that is at the one who is searching. Who is this self that is always unhappy, always resisting the now, always seeking the not now, or seeking happiness in time, but never finding it. And this moment, whether it's a sudden moment that's very clearly defined in our lives, or whether it's a less obvious moment, this time when we start to question who is the one that is seeking, who is the one that is unhappy. This, we could say, was the beginning of the end of the separate self, the beginning of the apparent return to our true nature, to aware presence. Of course, we never really return there because we never left there in the first place. But from the separate entity's point of view, the separate entity seems to leave and it seems to return. From aware presence's point of view, which is the only real point of view, there was never a separate entity to begin with. Nobody ever left home and nobody ever returns.
Non-duality network.